I wanted to, just before we get started, say how excited I am for the conversation we're going to have here tonight on the intersection of community and news. We're excited to get into it. So just to kind of ground us, I want to hear, Stephanie, from you. What is community to you, and why is it important overall?
I mean, community is everything. Community is your family. Community is your neighbor. Community is your work team. And if you think about your environment as a community, it will transform. If, for example, work, you just look at work like work. If you look at it like it's just your team, you're gonna be a shift worker. You're not gonna have pride in what you do. You're not gonna have a connection in what you do. But when you change the way you think about your environment, and when you think of it as a community, when you think the sum of these parts is greater than the individual, when you look at everything from a community perspective, right? If you live alone, if you live your life mentally alone and don't care about your neighbors or your neighborhood, well, listen, it's great if you win, but isn't it better to win on a team?
Yeah.
Because when you lose, and you lose alone, it's awful. But when you lose on a team, your neighbor, part of your community, is gonna pick you up, and you're gonna laugh together, and they're gonna help you. Yep. And so I think in every element of our lives, if you think of your environment as a community, it just makes the experience better. And I just want the place that I'm in, wherever it is, to maximize the happiness around it. So if you think community, I think you'll have a much better chance of happiness, and that's what success is.
Interesting, and we've seen so many recent studies about how much happier people are when they're engaging in a community in real life. And what about your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo some of what Stephanie said, but I feel like it's all about, I mean, this is community right here, right? Community is your family. It is the people that you work with every day, the people that you run into, the random person that you meet if you're on a Saturday at the beach and you strike up a conversation with them and hear a story from them. It's all about community. I think so much of your own self-confidence and the way in which you navigate life is about the community in which you surround yourself with, the conversations you have with people. And also from a journalistic perspective, I think I glean so many stories and I learn so much about where people are at in their lives and why people make the decisions that they do because of the conversations that I have with people within my community. And it doesn't necessarily need to be your nuclear family or your extended family that is your community. It's such a broad term, and it could be just someone random that you speak to, and suddenly you learn something so unique from them that you can apply to not only your professional life but your personal life. And I think we all, we all are better people for it.
Yeah,
but we need it. I mean, if you think about being a working mom, for example, right? And us versus them mentality is awful. When you're a working mom, you're dependent on community, right? Think about when your kids go off to school. Yasmin doesn't get to drop her kids at school, or maybe you do because of what time you're done, but I don't get to drop my kids at school ever. I don't get to pick them up almost ever. Yeah. So I need to think about the people who see my kids during the day as my community. And if I do, that doorman, that security guard at school, when he thinks about my kid and cares about them, when the lunch lady opens that banana, when another mom sees that my kid is in distress, they're not just another mom or another person that exists in my life. When they're part of your community, they care. And it's that caring that makes a difference.
And also, I will just add on to that, is that when you're not only going through tough times, but good times as well, is that community can be so incredibly helpful. Yeah. Being 19 months pregnant at work with a toddler at home, I mean, it's tough. And, you can talk to other people that have gone through the same experiences that you have to say, how did you deal with this? What did you do? And those sorts of things, can really elevate you and lift you up in a time when you need it.
Yeah, you all have touched on so many important points, including like that importance of that in real life, person to person, what you can gain from that you can't gain from being online. And given how many distribution channels that you all interact with, Twitter, I walked in, you all look at that, Instagram, YouTube, are you seeing that people are looking for a different type of way to consume news in real life community?
A different type of way to consume news.
Yeah, a different way, like an outlet for them to have a conversation about what they're listening to and reading outside of just Twitter or Facebook or Instagram.
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like initially when Twitter and Instagram got started, it was very one-sided, right? I think now I'm finding more and more that people want to actually have conversations. They want interaction. And it's tough, I think, when you're in news, especially, and you're in the public eye, you don't necessarily know where to go and how to navigate that, because there are people that will insult you and come after you, and especially if you say the wrong thing, you can get into trouble with your network. So you got to be careful about navigating that as well. But I think people really want a conversation outside and a personal connection outside of just Twitter and outside of Instagram and whatever medium it is that you choose to use. And the really cool thing, and I'll tell a little bit of an anecdote, but a story that I'm working on right now, I actually got a tip from a mom in another mom group about a story that could feasibly be huge. And it was only because she had found this from another mom group in her community. And then she tipped me off via Twitter, and then we direct messaged and we started talking about it, and it's something that I started to look into. So if people are finding ways to get in touch with others that has never been a possibility ever before. No.
Interesting.
I think community is essential in news, because right now there are so many news or news outlets that people trust relationships more than they trust information. And so as a person who delivers the news, for us, what is essential is to build a relationship with an audience. And whether it's through the platforms that we have on NBC, or where you can be more direct or intimate or personal through social media, the important thing is build the relationship so that viewer understands you, understands not opinion, but understands your point of view in terms of where you come from. And then I think there's a lot more that they trust in the information that you put out there. And it also allows you to make mistakes at times. And I think something that, I don't want to say it's false hope, but I don't think that Twitter, I actually don't think that Twitter is a great community. I think Twitter is where hecklers and adoring fans exist. Twitter is where you put something out and either the people who hate you are going to attack you, and the people who love you are going to adore you. And I wonder sometimes why we use Twitter. And in the last month, I've started to think more and more about why I use it. Because we use it, and then we're saying, like, well, what did they think? I mean, how did they like it? And then I wonder, well, why exactly are we using it? Because it's not like for many people, when you don't have a platform, it's great because suddenly it's somewhere, it democratizes getting news out, and then everyone can have a voice.
Of course.
But for me, the issue is that you have a voice without ever having to show your name or your face. And I take huge issue with that, because that is the opposite of community. Community is about truly putting yourself out there, your heart and your hand. And so I think Twitter is a heckler's haven.
And I want to stop you on that topic and hear a little bit more about how do you think that conversation shifts when we go from DMing, tweeting, to that in real life conversation, and why is that important in our current climate?
So I think as it relates to news, the problem with social media and news is, I'm gonna go one further. I would say the worst of it is podcasts. In that podcasts, because you have to find them, is where like-minded people who share an opinion listen to one another and just go right on, right on. And that is just making things more divided. And so when you can have a respectful, like when Yasmin was talking about her Sunday show, which really is a respectful roundtable where people of diverse thoughts can sit and hear what the other person says, that's when people can have open minds and open hearts and maybe start to change their views. But right now, when people have already decided how they feel, and when they only listen to someone who they already know agrees with them, that's a dangerous time. And if you can approach things with a community mindset, saying, come to my home, come to my table. In my home, at dinner, you could have a totally different opinion than I do. But you would listen to mine, and maybe I could change your mind because you respect me. And when you don't have to identify yourself, i.e. on Twitter, that's when respect is missing.
And think about how personal I think news has become. I think if we looked back to 25 years ago, the way news was such a different medium than it is now. I mean, we are more ourselves, which I appreciate, because I would never have been successful at that news person. I mean, I am more myself on TV. I'm exactly who I am sitting here, and the person I am having a conversation with you at a coffee shop as I am on television. And I am so thankful for that. And I think a lot of viewers appreciate that as well, because then you're able to share ideas. so often I have the best conversations when I am at a dinner table, when I'm surrounded by friends and we're talking about the issues at hand. And I wish that we could translate that to television to have real conversation. And I think a lot of times when people are watching the news, they oftentimes, like Stephanie said, want to hear what they believe, and they don't want to hear anything else beyond that. And if you go outside of, for MSNBC, for instance, if someone's watching and they only want to hear anti-Trump stuff, for instance, and you start to question something or applaud something that's happening within the Trump administration or talk about where the economy is at or whatever, you'll get attacked for it. And they're able to do that because, as Stephanie said, it is a very one-sided thing. But we have the responsibility to show an entire picture.
Of course, I want to
But
just.
the beauty about getting to be yourself today is there's nothing to hide. And Yasmin wouldn't have this opportunity if she was a fraud or if she hadn't done her homework. So she is a smart, extraordinary woman. She has done her homework, so I'm glad to hear what she has to say. I actually think that is much less treacherous than if a person is just simply sitting there reading you a teleprompter that they know nothing about and feel nothing about.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. I want to get to a topic that came up in a lot of our questions that were submitted from our community here today around how do you, Yasmin, report on topics that don't align with your own values?
It's every second of every day. And there's often times there's times where I'm like, what is my value on that? I don't even know what I think about this. And then I figure it out as I'm doing the story. It is part of being a journalist, right? You're constantly doing stories that challenge who you are, the way that you think. That's why I do it. Yeah. That's why I love it, because I feel like it actually makes me be a more critical thinker about things that are happening in the world. And honestly, for me, if it's something that I don't either agree with or I can't understand, then it's all about curiosity. I want to get to the root of why it is that person thinks the way that they do. I think so often, especially if you look back to the 2016 election, right? Everyone was like, oh, this person, a lot of people that wanted Hillary Clinton to win, they thought for sure she was going to win the election. And then when Trump won the election, they thought, how did this even happen? And they recognized how disconnected they were from the other parts of the country that voted Donald Trump into office. And I think that is still happening today, where so many of us don't understand each other and what's going on in the country and really in the global community. Right. And I think that for me, I feel like it's my job, not only professionally, but personally. Like, I really want to know personally, if someone thinks different than me, why? And I'm not going to judge them for it, and I hope that they don't judge me for it either.
Yeah,
I think there's a difference in covering stories that don't align with your values than there is stories that don't align with your sensibility. I think those are two different things. And so for me, every day when I go into my show, I ask myself and my team the question, I think every American wants to be socially free, physically safe, and financially secure. They all want to live their best lives. And at the end of the day, I think most people come from a good place. And so if we can approach the content that we cover, helping people get that information, it makes it easy to know what stories we're going to cover. And I want to tell a quick story. So about a year and a half ago, I was at a dude ranch in upstate New York with my husband and kids. And a waitress came and sat down, and she said, I want to talk to you, and I want to tell you why I love President Trump. And I said, come on down.
Interesting.
And she said, I love President Trump because he loves me. And I said, why do you think he loves you? And she said, because he came to see me. And she said, and because you think that I am poor white trash. And I was just I shuffled my kids off the table. And I said, I'm sorry, what? And then she told us her life story. And she said, I'm 55 years old. She said, I'm a waitress in this restaurant. She goes, they give me enough hours that I can't get a job anywhere else, but not enough hours that they give me health care. And she said, where you live in New York City, do you have charter schools? And I fell right for it. And I said, yes, my husband is a board chair of a charter school. And she goes, great, we have the shittiest public schools here. And I was like, oh gosh. And she said, those girls who live up in that city where you do, who are single moms like I was, they've got after-school programs. They've got Big Brother, Big Sister. You probably raise money for those things. And I said, yeah. And she said, we don't have those charity programs up here. And then she went on to say, I'm dependent on social services, and so are my 2 adult daughters who are single moms, and my special needs grandchild. And nobody in social services ever answers the phone. And she said, my story is not sad enough. I don't have a child washing up on shore on a boat, so I don't make the cover of your newspaper, but I'm certainly not pretty enough to come to your house for dinner. And she said, and I just sat there speechless at that point. And I said, but do you believe that President Trump's policies are actually going to help you? And she said, I don't know, but he came to visit me, and no one else ever did. And we keep saying, like, this forgotten American, this forgotten American. It's an invisible American. And so there is no real American versus not real American, but when you say, does it align with your values?
Right.
I'd like to think that everyone out there, and even when we talk about like all the hate rising in this country, many things what that woman said to me were rooted in racism. But the one glimmer of hope I felt was that her views were not rooted in hate. They were rooted in hopelessness. And when you feel hopeless, you start to blame someone else. So we're very quick right now to judge other people's values, not understanding their sensibility and where they come from. Right. And the more we can just start to think, everyone wants to live their best life. And if we can do that, I think it will start to open up understanding different points of view.
And I think the more that we listen to each other, as you did to that woman, listen to each other's stories and understand where they're coming from and why they're there and why they're making the decisions that they are. Because I think so often we don't listen enough. I mean, that's one of the biggest problems. We talk a lot, but we don't listen and hear what people actually have to say and the grievances that they have.
Yeah. So I want to take it a step further from listening into action. I know the reason why we were all here tonight is the article that Nikki mentioned when she kicked us off about the viewership hitting record highs and more women tuning into MSNBC. What I know from my experience is that when women come together, they don't just talk, they often, do things, take action together. And so my question for you is, do you see this as an opportunity for media to influence the ways in which women are taking action and gathering?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily an opportunity to influence, because I don't think that's our job, is to influence people to do one thing or another, right? I feel like it's more to educate and inform and gain people's ideas of what's going on in this country and why. I do think, 2 things I'll say is the MSNBC mom article. My mom actually posted all over her Facebook page, and I feel like she didn't necessarily get the point that it doesn't mean like moms of MSNBC anchors. It's more of like a broader look at things.
My mom has come on MSNBC a few times, and then she's like, it's weird they didn't talk about me in it. I'm like, it's not about our mom.
Yeah, exactly. The MSNBC moms. Oh my God, I just blanked. What was the...
I think the question is, what opportunity
Baby brain.
do you see, all good, communities to form as you're seeing, record-breaking viewership and...
Right. So, I mean, look at how many women right now are running for office with the upcoming midterms. I mean, it's really incredible, and we're doing a lot of profiles on a lot of these women that are going to be running. So, again, I don't think it is our job. Well, geez. Maybe it is. I don't think it's our job to influence women to act, right? Because that's not what we're tasked with. I think it is our job to inspire women to feel like their issues matter, right? Think about all the issues that we've been talking about for the last year, whether it's the Me Too movement, whether it's maternal health, job security, all these things that affect women, family separation, as many of you know, that affect women at their core. And I think that is what is inspiring women right now, not only to act and to get involved in their communities, and even if it's just conversations like these meetup groups that you're having, it's not necessarily going so far as to run for office or to change your career altogether, but maybe volunteering in an effort to do that sort of thing. For me, I feel like it's more about informing people as to what is being provided for them, what they're lacking, or what policies are lacking, and to get involved more in their community.
Great.
I would say, one of the reasons viewership is up a lot, not that people have become political junkies. I mean, I have no background in politics. I don't love politics. for me, it's about decency, and it's about restoring our dignity. And I want to know that I am leaving my children a world that was better than the world that my parents gave me.
Right.
And right now, that's being held into question.
Right.
And so I think that's one of the reasons things are so important. And while I don't think, to Yasmin's point, we're not organizing people and creating change, I think something that people are learning in the news, I think women, a lot of people in the last year, in their outrage, have stood up and said enough is enough. But I think because of what we're covering in a detailed fashion, they're learning, though marches and standing up is important, it doesn't move the needle in a massive way.
Right.
So look at Mitch McConnell, for example. Mitch McConnell's not getting a Christmas card from me, and he's not winning any popularity contest. But he is a tactical beast. And you could say all day long that you hate him and oh my goodness, they didn't, like, how many more times can you sit in a coffee shop and go, oh my goodness, it is so unfair what they did about Merrick Garland. Great, well, you know what? Trump won, and now they've got 2 Supreme Court justices.
Right.
And women's health is being held in question right now. And so this is a moment to say, once you create a community, you need to do more than just stand up. You have to say, what are the rules? Let me learn this game, and let me figure out how to win this game. And I think that we are trying not to give people prescriptions on here's the action to take, but to say, here's what is actually happening in this country because you want to live your best life. And that is inspiring people to say, oh my goodness, I need to stand up and call my congressperson, because complaining into the wind does nothing.
And think about the Roy Moore vote in Alabama, right? It was African-American women that came out to the polls that turned that vote, that Doug Jones won the seat. And so I think it's also inspiring women and driving women to recognize that their votes actually matter.
Yep.
Where for so long, I think a lot of women felt like it didn't.
Think about the zero tolerance policy. I'm not saying, oh my goodness, MSNBC did it, but the zero tolerance policy, the child separation policy, was put in place with the administration already having been warned by their own Health and Human Services Department of the damage it would do. Yep. They were well aware of the hundreds of millions of dollars it was going to cost, and they moved forward with it anyway. President Trump only signed that executive order because he was shamed into it. If the media had not given that attention, if intrepid reporters like Jacob Soboroff and Marianne Atencio had not been there in detention centers and said, they will not let us inside with a camera, but we have been there, it is a cage, none of that would have changed. And so when Ivanka Trump can send a tweet that says, thank you to my father for signing that executive order, and now it is time for Congress to take action, we get to say, honey, that was his policy.
Right.
And so that's why news is so important.
Right. So I want to continue on that point, and hearing you all talk about this kind of prompts a future question, which is, you all are behind teleprompters, behind the screen all day, and you're face to face with so much of your audience. What's one thing that you want them to know?
I just want you to watch more.
Ratings matter.
Please.
They'll take it away from us if you don't watch. No.
You know what? I have thought of mine.
Yeah.
Watch everything. Hear me out.
Go ahead.
You're going to say at a dinner party, I really can't believe that no one covers climate change. Do you know why no one covers climate change? Because when we talk about it on TV, you change the channel.
So true.
So do me a favor. When you're at a party and you go, I just think the news has gotten so tabloid, and I'm totally tired of hearing about Stormy Daniels.
Why are the Kardashians so famous?
Well, you know what?
Yeah.
We talk about it because you demand it.
It's true.
And we would love to go deeper. We would love to make segments longer. We would love to go on location.
God.
You know, Yasmin was just talking about being at Current TV and working and living in the Middle East. Don't you think she would love to go there and do her show from there?
They won't
Demand
send
it.
me.
Watch more of those. Because you know what? TV networks don't have to. Because they know you love watching Michael Avenatti, and you love watching Anthony Scaramucci, and you love the tabloid cesspool and the following of the tweet. So watch, demand more in-depth reporting. We would love to cover climate change.
Let me piggyback off of that, and I'll tell you an anecdote. So we obviously, have editorial meetings for our shows every single day to talk about what the rundown's going to be. And as I said, it's not a joke. I mean, news is a business, and it's ratings driven. And there are people saying, well, that's not going to rate, and people are going to watch it, as Stephanie said. So people want to hear Trump. They want to hear Trump, Trump, Trump. They want to hear what's happening with Trump, what's happening with the Mueller investigation. They want to hear about Manafort. They want to hear about this and that. And when the Me Too stuff came down with Harvey Weinstein, with the CBS head honcho, I mean, all of it. Obviously, as a woman, I want to cover that. For God's sakes, like, finally we're able to talk about this. Things that we've been experiencing as women forever. Things that I feel like we have been silenced on because our jobs were in question, because it was challenging the very people that put us in those jobs in the first place. And I was told that there's times that those things don't rate. People turn the TV off. So Steph is exactly right, that you guys have to demand that those things be heard, that you need to continue watching just because, you feel like, okay, we've already heard this before, it's been there, done that. I mean, if you want to hear about those sorts of things, whether it's the environment, as Steph said, or it's the Me Too stuff, keep watching. I will also say, I guess one other thing is, that maybe like a secret thing is I still get insecure on television. And people always say, like, do you ever get nervous? Do you still get nervous when and I've been doing this, for a long time now, but yes, I actually still get nervous every time I go on TV and do my show. And I actually think that's a good thing. It drives you.
Wow.
And it keeps you excited and asking the right questions and being there and being present.
Such great insights and clear takeaways for us. I want to transition to some of the questions that our community put together, and I want to actually toss it back to you because you touched on being a woman and what that means. Joanna asked, the question is, how do you use your voice and your platform to support the issues that are impacting women today?
Is Joanna in the room? Do I get to address her directly?
Joanna's here.
Hi, Joanna. I think it really is about, for me, it's about the editorial lineup of my show, right? If there's something that I really give a crap about, that I really feel like is going to affect women, that I feel like people need to hear about, and it's something that I care about, then I want to make sure that it makes it into my show. And I have to fight for it a lot of times. The beauty of it is when you get to anchor a show and you have the opportunity to do it, you do get a little bit more say in the game than you would have if you were a correspondent. But now you get to fight for it a little bit more. And so for me, I feel like that's really the platform that I'm using. And if it's not able to get on television, if, for instance, they tell me people aren't going to watch that's not the news of the day, it's not breaking, we have all this other stuff that's going on, and we have to make sure that that's what we have covered, then it's something that I use on my social platforms, and I talk about on my social platforms and have conversations that way as well.
That's great.
I'm going to go much more micro. So I've spent a lot of years sort of in the women's empowerment space. It's sort of how I ended up getting into TV. And when I worked in finance, I founded Women on Wall Street at Deutsche Bank, and I actually ended up in television because I used to be part of an organization called the White House Project, which was a group that was focused on women executives and really just trying to get women across industries to the top of their fields. And one day the founder had the board all having lunch, and she said, women and minorities always get lumped together, women and minorities. But if you take the 50 most powerful black men in the United States, they are way more focused on helping one another. Women have done a lot to encourage girls to study math and science, to help women manage work-life balance and transitioning back into work after they have kids. But at the top of their fields, it's still very thin. And it's not that women are out to get each other, it's just not in our mindset yet. And an example you could give on the reverse is a Jesse Jackson. When Ford Motor Company goes to issue a debt deal, he will call the CFO of Ford Motor Company and say, are you going to give some of your underwriting fees to a minority-owned firm? And Ford will say, yes, yes. I mean, corporate America cares. And not that they're out to get women, they're just not thinking that way yet. And so the founder said, each woman at this table is senior in your industry. Each of you need to say what you want to do next. And someone else at this table, because you're all influencers, has to raise their hand and say, I'm going to get you there. And that's what happened to me. That's how I ended up in television. I said I've always wanted to work in the media. It was after the financial crisis. And I said, I realized that banks did a lot of bad things, but the financial industry also fuels the American dream. It's what finances it. And there was a woman there who ran human capital management at Bloomberg, and she said, I'm going to be the person to get you there, and she did. And so the reason I tell that story, yes, it's really important for us to cover stories about women. It's important to support big initiatives, but there's a lot of women's initiatives out there.
There are.
There's a lot of diversity groups. And on some levels, there's a lot of pink ghettos. And a lot of women who care about it, they all want to have an initiative, and they all want to have a hashtag. And you go to any corporation, oh my gosh, of course, we're going to have a women's conference. And they have a women's conference, and she's spoken at it, and I've spoken at it, and you get up there and you give your speech, and the CEO sits there for like 5 minutes after the intro, and then he walks out the side door. If you want to actually have an impact, use your platform to help another woman. Find young women at work and give them more time. Help them. When you're going through the recruiting process, try to hire women. We were talking about it earlier. When I worked in finance, you walk on a trading floor, it's not just dudes, it's an infinite amount of dudes that played lacrosse in college. Do you think there is a correlation between guys who are good at lacrosse and guys who are great at trading equities? No. It's about a community. And that they've built an extra. I'm married to one, but it's in micro places where you can have an impact. So I'm not saying don't read Lean In, don't have a hashtag, don't say sing it sister, but do a tiny thing for 5 minutes every day, and it's gonna have, I think, a way bigger impact.
Agreed. So important. I want to take us back to some of the more news-specific questions from the audience. So from Lee, conversation, and Lee, are you with us?
Pardon?
Maybe not yet, just looking for Lee in the audience. Her question is, there's so much confusion and skepticism, and you touched on this when we kind of kicked off around what people are watching and what people are consuming. Stephanie, for you, how do you assure your audience that your news is the real news in the current environment?
I'm my best self, and I say I'm sorry when I screw up.
Yeah.
Like, that's all I can do.
Yeah. Yasmin, anything to
No,
add?
I would agree. I think it goes back to the authenticity. That I think you have to be completely yourself and be completely authentic when it comes to news. And you just, if people want to watch you, they watch.
Right.
If they don't, they don't. If they think you're real news, they can think you're real news. There's some people that are going to always think that you're not real news, and you're never going to win them over either.
And you touched a little bit about this in the beginning, Yasmin, but what responsibility do you feel like you have when you show up every day to your viewers?
To tell the truth.
Yeah.
To tell the truth, to elevate, to have the conversations that we should be having in our homes. And again, I mean, I feel like I'm a broken record, but to be authentic, to be authentically myself, to know that you're getting me when you're watching me and when you're tuning in, and to make people think outside of their box, outside of what they know to be their life, and outside of what they have always thought, the way in which they've always felt, to challenge people every day to think, okay, actually maybe what I thought about how this should have gone, or what I thought about how this narrative played out is actually different, or maybe I still think I'm right, but I understand where the other person is coming from.
I honor my hour or 2 hours, and I'm super lucky that I have that platform.
Right.
So yes, I do my homework, but as important as that is, it's my responsibility, and I work really hard to bring the smartest people on TV.
Right.
And if I can do that, then hopefully I am making my viewers smarter, more prepared for their day. And I think that's the best we can do. I think right now, this time in history, there's far less TV presenters reading a teleprompter than there are people invested in and reporting on news.
Thank you for that. And one of the questions that we hit on earlier, but how do you see the news distribution consumption changing? I mean, you talked about where it was in 2004, where it is today. You kind of cringed when you said someone tweeting at you. How do you see, where do you see the future of news going?
I mean, I think the beautiful thing today is great content finds eyeballs. So on some level, the barriers of entry have dropped so much that you don't need to only be part of XYZ platform to have access. The problem with barriers of entry having dropped so much is standards have. So at NBC, I can't walk in, write something on the back of a piece of paper and put that on NBCnews.com. I have a huge admiration and appreciation for legal and standards. I worry that that is going away. I'm extremely worried with news distribution on social media platforms. So social media can say all day long, we're not a media company. Bullshit. All of these companies are based on advertising revenue. And every time NBC loses an advertiser, we're not losing them to CBS. We're losing them to a social media platform. So Sheryl Sandberg can say all day long, we're just a community platform, and this is how people are going to find each other for their high school reunion. Baloney. Right. It's an advertising revenue-based business. You are not Facebook's customer. You are Facebook's product.
Interesting.
And one of the things that happened in the news business when news presenters and TV personalities started to get social media platforms that were bigger than their news organizations,
right.
That's dangerous. Like Yasmin and I both talk like with that slight fear that NBC's the boss. Yeah. And NBC should be the boss. And it's amazing because, and I'm not dogging on any other networks, but you see it happen. You see news networks denounce a story, say this is our position, and then primetime comes on and their anchor says the opposite. And that anchor is brazen enough to do that because of their social media platform. And so something that I hope, and I don't know how we're going to get back to, is to respect best standards and practices.
Yasmin, what would you add?
Yeah, what I would just add to that is also because I started in the medium of current TV. I don't know if any of you guys know what current TV was, but it was kind of like Vice before Vice. And I was 24 years old when I first started, and it was literally me with my camera in Iran, in Afghanistan, doing stories every day. And we felt like that was the future then, and this was 2005. And we recognized that I felt like people just weren't ready for it quite yet, and everybody took a step back, and it was both an online medium and it was television, but they weren't sort of ready for that kind of content. I do feel like the future, because Stephanie covered the bases with the standards, which I completely agree with in all respects, is also the fact that we are all, I think, becoming more and more storytellers. And I think, and I think that is an incredible resource for all of us to have to learn from one another as well, in that we have these platforms and access to so many different ways of telling stories that we never had before. And I think that's really going to add to the medium of not only storytelling but news as well. And it's going to be it's a difficult balance because you have these standards, because you have people saying this is what happened, and you're like, okay, well, I can't just go on television and say this is what happened because you told me this is what happened.
But the problem is people do, and in this
and that's where you get into trouble.
And the path that we're on in terms of storytelling is people are telling the stories that they want to tell.
Right.
So that line of what is news is getting blurred, and it's very dangerous.
Right. Well, I want to close this out on a little bit more of a fun topic, which comes from Reshma, who is one of, I think, your biggest fans. Reshma, if you're here. The question.
You don't like me, Reshma? Oh. Hello?
She did hit on her transition from banking to journalism earlier. But the question is, how do you stay on, for both of you, how do you stay on top of so many facts?
Well, I would say two things. I mean, I read constantly, but I know my lane. So I don't try to be all things to all people. So the Middle East is a perfect example. That's not a great lane for me. And I make it pretty clear to my audience that here are my guests who are the experts. So finance and the economy is my zone. So I would say that I'm not a utility player. I'm a second baseman. And I try to kill it on second base. And so on my show, I have a daily segment that's probably the marquee of my show, Money, Power, Politics. I do another one, Money, 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 and my other show, and I go on other platforms on NBC News and Primetime MS talking about finance and the economy. And so other things that I cover it because I have a broad news show, but I make it pretty clear to my audience what my lane is.
Do you want me to answer too, Reshma?
She's so mad at you.
Stephanie will just answer for me. I have one on Sundays too. You don't have to wake up at 5. Staying on top of facts is exhausting, I will say. And I don't think you can stay on top of everything. It's really tough right now. It is. That's the honest to God truth. I mean, you cannot. My husband and I get in this argument constantly. And he's like, where are you? Why aren't you talking to me? We're trying to have dinner. And I'm like looking, oh my God, this just happened, or this person just said this. The second you turn something off, I feel like you lose sight of what's actually going on. And then you show up at work the next day and someone mentions something that they want to be talked about in the show, and you feel like an idiot because you literally turned your phone off for 20 minutes and you missed it. Yeah. So it's really tough. You have incredible teams as well that really help us out, I think. But I will, going off of what Stephanie said, and I think to anybody who's actually interested in this room of getting into journalism, I think it's also a really good point to make, is to recognize what you're great at in your industry as well, to recognize where your strengths lie. And to go with that. And that really distinguishes you from everything else. Like, I'm not going to talk about finance, right? I might make like a passing jab at it, but I'm certainly not going to do a whole segment on it because
I can't even pronounce her last name.
I will
It's true.
stick. Yeah.
It's true.
So I'll bring Steph on the show to talk about finance, and then I'll stick to the Middle East stuff. So as she said, I think that really is what's important, is to really know your expertise and to go with that, and that'll also elevate you in whatever industry that you're in. Is being really good at what you're good at, and making sure you're the best at that.
I would say one other thing on staying on top of things. Don't read everything.
Yeah.
So I actually do unplug on the weekends. Like when I'm with my kids, I turn it off. It's dangerous to always be skimming. When you're skimming news, you're not reading it. You're just reading headlines. And I think that's when you get yourself in trouble. I got in trouble about a year and a half ago. I was in the zone of like always scanning Twitter. And on a Thursday night on my way to dinner, I quickly read a headline that had my name, like someone had tweeted it at me. And it said, it was right when we were talking conflicts of interest and emoluments clause, and it said, Fox News had their DC bureau Christmas party at the Trump Hotel. And I read it quickly. The next day we're on TV and we're talking about emoluments, and 2 other companies did host events at the Trump Hotel in Washington. And I added the 3rd. I said, da-da-da-da-da, and Fox News had this. And I hadn't done my homework. I had just scanned it. The show's over, and by the time the show's over, Standards is standing at the edge of my set going, where did you get that information? And I was like,
Just not a good
oh
feeling.
no, I'm about to say the Twitter. But the thing is, someone trolled me on purpose. So they linked my name and they linked 3 other journalists to see who would do it.
Wow.
And by the time the show was over, you have all of these alt-right bloggers, fake news, and I'm going, I can't believe this happened to me. But it happened to me to that exact point. When you're kind of skimming, there's so much volume out there. Don't skim. Dig deep with trusted resources that you value. I mean, it was horrible for me. And I mean, then I got back on TV and apologized, but that would be my advice.
And it's not just our responsibility to be accurate about the news that we're putting out there and retweeting or whatever, talking about on air. I feel like it's everybody's responsibility as well for you guys to read into what to what it is that you're interested in, and making sure that you're fact checking the stuff that you're retweeting or you're talking about, so as not to. Exactly. Yeah.
Responsibility on both sides here. Thank you so much to both of you all and our incredible community for being here tonight. Thank you so much for joining us.